So in this last video about the Trillo project, I just wanted to make some final remarks about the project itself and Flexbox in general. So here I have that web app that I showed you before called caniuse.com. Okay, and so in here we can see browser support for various CSS properties and entire modules as well. So like the Flexbox module. And so that's what I have here. So I just type Flexbox here, and then down here we can see the browser support for Flexbox. So here I can hit show all, and so now we can see which browsers do support and which don't support Flexbox. So you see that in the Internet Explorer 11 there is some problems with that, and with the 10 as well. Okay, but you also see that their usage is not really that big, so like 0.11% or 3%. Okay, then you see that all the Microsoft Edges supported, Firefox as well, Chrome, Safari, Opera as well, and even here the mobile Safari on iOS. So the only problem that you may have is here with the older Android browsers, but they also support Flexbox here with the WebKit prefix. Okay, then you also have this Android stock browser here, which just supports the old Flexbox spec and does not support wrapping. So overall, you see that actually the browser support is not all of that bad. So actually up here you can see the global stats. And so you see that actually 88, almost 89% of the web users do actually support the unprefixed version of Flexbox, which is the one we're looking for. Okay, so it's not all that bad. Now remember that a long time ago, I think it was in the first project or so, that I said that Flexbox is not really ready to be reused. So I said that because I assumed that the goal was to support everyone. So every user on every browser. But if you're okay with, for example, dropping, let's say, these older versions of Internet Explorer, then that's absolutely fine. And you can go ahead and use Flexbox today for all your sites, all your apps, and never again have to use float layouts. Okay, so if that's okay with you, then it's perfectly fine. Just remember that the layout is a fundamental part of any website or any web app. And so if a browser doesn't support it, well, it's going to look really messy to that user. And actually, I wanted to know how the Trillo app would look like without Flexbox. And so I simply disabled all the Flexbox in our app. And that's what it looked like. Okay, so it looks really terrible, as you can see. So moving down here, this is how our website looks, or our app, without any Flexbox support at all. Okay, well, it's still kind of usable, but of course it looks just terrible. Okay. Now for users on Internet Explorer like 10 or 9 or 8 even, many of the features we're using here are not going to work anyway. So you kind of have to decide anyway if you want to support these users or not when you use other properties that I showed you along this project and the other project as well. Okay, so again, using Flexbox or not is a decision that you have to take, keeping in mind that maybe some users will not be really able to see our page, but that might be actually completely fine. So for example, the Internet Explorer users, they are many times older people or maybe people working in older companies that don't update their computers or their operating systems, and therefore they're stuck with Internet Explorer. But if that's not the audience of your website anyway, well, then you can just assume that you don't need to support them. And then it's no problem to simply start using Flexbox right now. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say about support. All right, and since we're talking about support, let's actually open up our app here in the older Safari, and actually I mean in the older Firefox that I showed you before. Because then here you will see that the mask image property that we used here is not working. Okay, so you cannot see these icons here because the mask image and mask size properties that we used are simply not working. So back then when we implemented this, I said that I was going to write a feature query for that a bit later, and right now that's the time to do it. Okay, so let's move back to our code editor and here to our list. And so we are going to write a feature query containing this part here of the code. So how do we do that? Well, it's just support, and then we have to put the property that we want supported. So we want WebKit mask image to be supported, And remember, we also have to specify a value here. And so I'm just going to put an empty image here. It doesn't really matter. This is just because we really have to specify the value. Okay? Or the same thing here, but without the prefix. Okay, so if we put something with the prefix here, we should also include the version without the prefix. Okay? So if we support the mask image, then of course this is what should happen. But if we don't, well, then this is what happens. So the background image set to the icon and then background size cover. Okay, so that was actually the first solution that I showed you back then. But the problem with this is, remember that we cannot change the color of the icon. But that's something that we cannot really change. So on these older Mozilla browsers, for example, the user will just see the icon in black and not in our pink color. Now this is not really going to work, but let me show you why. Okay, so actually here it's not working in Firefox, but if you take a look at Chrome now, you see that it's also black. So let's take a look at that. And it's here in the before. All right, so you see that, of course, the mask image and the mask cover here are applied because, in fact, we do support the mask image. Now, the problem here is that at the same time, the background image is also active. Okay, and so we have to basically remove that, because if we didn't have the background image, then it would look just fine. Okay, and so what we have to do here now is to just say background image none, and that should fix it. So you see, now we have our pink icon here in Chrome, and if we go to Safari, we have it in black because it doesn't support the mask image. All right, so that's the power of the feature query using the supports add rule. Next up, I also wanted to run our build process here in this project. So let's close this folder. So this is here our package.json file. And remember that right in the beginning, we actually edited it and reduced the build process here to only 3 steps. So compile, prefix, and compress, right? So let's just take a look at our compiled CSS file, which we already have here, which is this one. And so we see that we actually wrote over 500 lines of CSS code. So that's a great job. So a lot of code here. And now let me just take a look at the file size here. So just because I'm curious, this has 13K, so that's not really a lot. But anyway, let us apply our build process and see how much we can reduce this, okay? So let's open up the terminal here, and actually it's already here. Okay, and I'm going to increase the font size a bit so you can see what's going on. And I will actually stop this process here. So the one that we used for development, which tracks changes on our files. So on the Mac, I just hit Command C, and on Windows, you probably just have to close the window, okay? All right, so let's decrease this a bit. And for now, I'm going to do it one by one, okay, so that we have all the files. Or actually, that's not really necessary, because if we simply run the build process here, then it will actually also give us all of these 3 files, right? So npm run build CSS. And here we go. So that's actually it. So our initial file is the compiled file. So this one here, right? And that's actually exactly the same as the one that we looked at before. Then from there comes the prefixed file. And so let's see if it adds any prefix here. And yeah, it added to the box sizing. And so you see that it also added a bunch of prefixes here for Flexbox. So this is our original one. Then we have MS Flexbox, which stands for the older specification on Microsoft. So MS Flexbox is like the same as Flex, but in older versions of the Internet Explorer. And then there's even something called WebKit Box, which was a very early implementation of the Flexbox specification in WebKit, okay? Then down here you also have some older versions of the Flexbox, okay? And that is practically the same as Justify Content Space Between used to be called like MS Flexpack Justify. Okay, so that's completely different, but this is just to support the bit older Internet Explorers. Okay, and so you will find this here everywhere we use Flexbox. And so our file growth from, I think we had 500 lines to 667 lines. Okay, and then this down here is something called a source map. Okay, doesn't really matter right now. So we have all of this CSS code right now. And that then compressed is our final CSS file. So all of this code here. All right, and this way it doesn't even look like so much. So let's just take a look at how much space it's occupying right now. So we had 13K and now we have 14. Okay, so that's even more than we had before. But I guess that's because of all of the prefixes that were added. So of course that's not a huge deal, okay? So 1K doesn't make any difference at all. Okay, so that was our build process. Now just looking again at our site here, just one very quick thing that I wanted to say is that this layout could also easily have been built with the even newer CSS module called CSS grid layout. Okay, and so that grid layout would maybe even be better for laying out the global overall layout of this app here, okay? So in modern CSS development, Flexbox is many times used in conjunction with the newer CSS grid layout module, so that the overall layout of the page or the app can be done with the grid, and then the smaller details, like most of the stuff that we did here in this interface, can be handled by using Flexbox. Okay, but that's a topic for another project. And actually I will also have a grid project right in this course, not at lunchtime, but it's going to be there a little bit later. So keep an eye out for that. And by then you will learn everything there is to know about the very new, very modern, and really great CSS grid layout. So we're now almost done, but another thing that I wanted to talk about is that there are actually many ways to make this project even better. And these would be amazing ways for you to practice your new skills. So I came up with a couple of challenges for you to try out if you feel like it. So the first challenge that I came up with is for you to display some kind of user menu when the user hovers over the username in the user nav. Okay, so something like user settings or something like that. Okay, then something very similar is to display a message menu when hovering over the chat icon in the user nav. So imagine something like Facebook. Okay, so when you hit the message icon, then it shows a list of your latest messages, right? And so you could code up something like that. Another thing that would be really cool would be to display a box with suggestions as soon as the user starts typing in the input field, so up there in our search bar. So imagine when you Google something, then it also shows you this box with some suggestions, and you could code up something like that, right? Now next, you could also create a caption for the gallery item with a nice hover effect. So right now we only have the figure element there with an image, but without any caption. And so you could add one caption and show that with a nice hover effect when we hover the image. Okay? And finally, you could make the page really 100% responsive, even for viewport sizes below the 500 pixels. Because that's something that we didn't really do, because I don't want it to waste any more of your time watching me type simple code. Okay? And maybe you could even implement responsive images like we did in the Natures project. So these are 5 challenges for you to have some more fun with this project and with Flexbox in general. Now I didn't actually code these up myself, and so of course I don't have a solution that I could show you. But it would be really interesting to see how each and every one of you implements these features in a different way. So if you do these challenges, then please share your results in the questions area. I would really love to see your results. Alright, can you do that? Okay, and with this, we actually wrap up our Trillo project. So I hope that you had as much fun building it as I did by building it with you together in these videos. And even more, I hope that you learned everything you want and need to know about Flexbox, so that now you can go ahead and code up your own design ideas and layouts using the immense power and flexibility of Flexbox. Alright, so that's it for this section. Hope to see you in the next one.